Good afternoon, fellow patriots. This is Matt Shea, and welcome to Patriot Radio, broadcasting live from deep inside the heart of the future Liberty State. Brought to you once again by On Fire Ministries, in the legacy of Dr. Stan Monteith, bringing you the story behind the story and the news behind the news, where it's not about right or left, it's about right and wrong. It's about our hope not being in man, but in Jesus Christ. About not ending in prayer, but moving to action. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Father, deliver us from the evil one.
Welcome to Patriot Radio.
Good afternoon, fellow patriots, and welcome to Patriot Radio. Today, well, a key U.S. ally in the fight against China appears to be collapsing into communism. The hostage deal in Israel, well, that looks like more of a temporary ceasefire. And back here at home, some great news is Trump nominees running roughshod over the Democrats. Also, our guest today is going to be Mike Shelby from the Early Warning Network, former Intel NCO and intelligence analyst, about the attempt by Marxist organizations here in the United States to kickstart another campaign to stop Trump. But they haven't been getting much traction yet. Here at Patriot Radio, we bring you information before everybody else so you and your family can be prepared. The times ahead, in fact, the times that are already upon us, especially in this run-up to inauguration. But remember, there is no fear. We were made for this time. Also, you can follow us and you can be in the know quicker than everybody else by going to that QR code, clicking on it, and following us on Telegram for real-time intelligence analysis and breaking news. Again, we're an aggregator. We bring it from all kinds of different sources. So really, it's critical during this run-up to the election that you follow the news closely so that you and your family are not caught off guard. Also, coming up during this time, a lot of people need prayer. A lot of people have been isolated. So if you need prayer, we want to partner with you. We want to pray with you. Go to that QR code and send in a prayer request to us. We would love to pray for you and your family. You can also follow us on Rumble. Subscribe to us there. Make sure, too, that you check out Patriot TV. I think 6 million or something subscribers on Patriot TV. Just an amazing amount of people on Patriot TV right now, creating its own economy for patriots. And just really warms my heart to see this. We need to stop giving money to those that want to seek our destruction. We have better opportunities out there, better options out there. So join the Patriot TV community. Check it out. See if it's not up your alley and something that that your family would tremendously benefit from. We also have some opportunities coming up, and you're going to hear these coming up here in the next 2-3 weeks for you to become a part of the Patriot economy so that we're not giving our money to China, we're not giving our money to groups that don't have our values, but we're actually sowing into the kingdom. That brings us now to wisdom from God's Word. By the way, I realized, I think Alex Newman was using encouraging word from the Word, so we're wisdom from God's Word. We love Alex Newman. All right. From Proverbs 27, verse 12. This is what the Early Warning Network is really going to get to today. Proverbs 27, verse 12. A prudent man sees evil and hides himself, but the naive proceed and pay the penalty. In other words, you don't have to let evil attack you. You don't have to let evil steal your money. There's a better option. You see, the enemy does not have the ability to give us anything. The enemy does not have the ability to create anything. The enemy does not have the ability to do anything unless we let him. That's why it says resist the devil and he will flee from you. That actually means, in the Greek, take a public affirmative stand against Satan and his minions and watch what happens. All right. And what happens is God's kingdom is released. That brings us now to your very packed daily intelligence briefing. Coming to us from the globalist front.
The future is built by us. We have the means to make progress on the global agenda.
AI development is now, well, going to plan your economy as well. At least that's what the globalists want. Chips, data, energy, and talent. Humans make chips, generate data, produce energy, and supply brain power. This sounds really eerily like the Matrix. It is. It's this weird, like, overlord watching us do this. The blueprint is essentially a picture of CEO Sam Altman's brain that makes a future where we get a universal basic income and we're essentially slaves. So, outlining policy proposals for how the U.S. can maximize AI. And of course, this is going to be for your benefit and my benefit, that we don't need to think as much as we used to. Somehow this feels like devolution, that we're getting dumber and intentionally being dumbed down. So we'll just be sitting in, these VR virtual reality booths staring at something that doesn't exist. I don't know about you, but one way we can break through this is get out in the sunlight, go hiking, get out with your family, do activities, go biking, do something outside. We don't need to be chained to screens all day long. Man was not meant for that to happen. That brings us now to the China front. China blacklists 7 U.S. firms for involvement in Taiwan arms sales. It's called the Unreliable Entity List, or Reliable if you love America. Effective from Tuesday, the blacklisted companies, which include Intercoastal Electronics, Iron Mountain Solutions, find that name very interesting, by the way, Applied Technologies Group, will be banned from exporting to and importing from China or making new investments in the country. China is starting to feel the heat. You could tell this by the rhetoric ramping up. And also, China commentators saying that Trump's Greenland threats create an opening for China to invade Taiwan. Really? China has been planning, will be planning to invade Taiwan. It's part of their 50-year strategy. Let's not be stupid here and try to cover over China's imperialistic ambitions. The Communist Party in China, in a secret speech, 2000, General Chi Watian's secret speech, he said that the communists would rather go to war to keep power if they were facing an economic collapse, which is, they are facing certainly an economic downturn right now with the United States decoupling. Yeah, China's scrambling right now. And they may go to war, but they were already planning to do it. Trump's moves in Greenland, Trump's moves in Panama already reflect this imperialistic strategy by China to take these choke points. One is the Arctic trade routes. The other is the key trade route for the United States between our coasts. Of course, Trump is going to address that, but China already had these ambitions. Also, the U.S. is tightening semiconductor controls to curb diversion in China. You're just going to see this economic warfare going back and forth, especially as Trump takes office here in a few days. While speaking at an event yesterday, actually, but this is, well, I don't want to date this, but speaking at an event, President-elect Donald Trump's National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, stated that we will seek to increase and speed up the delivery of weapons to Taiwan in order to counter China, with him stating we have over a $20 billion backlog of things that they paid for and that we need to work hard to free up and have them get what they paid for. What is left unsaid in this, and what I've heard through my own sources directly from Taiwan, by the way, and also here in the United States, they don't know each other, is that the Biden administration was intentionally delaying the delivery of some of these weapons, some of the ammunition to Taiwan. That orders were being delayed, canceled, rerouted at the last minute. This is the subtle ways in which the Biden administration has weakened America and weakened our allies. So the idea here is really good, that we need to abide by our agreements. If Taiwan has purchased things, they need to get them, and they need to get them quickly. But understand there's an intentional aspect of this that really hasn't been talked about publicly or in the media. I love this. China on course to become world's most Christian nation within 15 years. There is something unstoppable happening in China that we quite often forget. South Korea, a trusted friend and partner on the verge of collapse under communist-controlled South Korean Democrat Party. Yes, they raided the president's house, and they did arrest him. He's now going to trial. He did do a pre-recorded speech that was released and essentially confirms what all of us that have been watching this have sensed, and that is that this is a communist takeover of one of our key U.S. allies. He has said that they didn't even have jurisdiction to issue these arrest warrants, that they're putting him on a sham trial. Boy, this sounds really, really familiar. It's like the leftists use tactics in one country, export them to other countries. Very interesting. You'll see the U.S. military has been pretty quiet about this. It'll be interesting to see what Trump does to address this issue and to push back on the communists in South Korea. The communists in South Korea. You think that emboldens the North? Of course it does. That brings us now to the Middle East front. Benjamin Netanyahu, this is breaking news, said that there has been no ceasefire deal yet, and that media reports about the Israeli army agreeing to withdraw from the Philadelphia corridor on the border with Egypt are false. So he's pushing back right now. This comes literally within half an hour, an hour of an announcement by President Trump. So I want to see how this shakes out. But first, from Syria, small pockets of locally organized armed resistance against HTS have emerged in Syria. The expansion of such resistance would strain the bandwidth of HTS-led forces. So it looks like there are, as we predicted, groups forming in the mountains close to Lebanon and other places to fight against the Al-Qaeda, ISIS-connected leaders of Syria right now. President Trump did say, quote, "We have a deal for the hostages in the Middle East. They will be released shortly," end quote. He normally doesn't release something like that unless they do actually have a deal. So something happening with Bibi right now. And just kind of stepping back, some analysis here. Remember, Bibi, he really turned his back on President Trump when Biden supposedly won in 2020. And there might be some of that going on here. A little bit of payback, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is that Trump has announced a ceasefire deal. Now, Israel-Hamas ceasefire deal will begin on Sunday when the first hostages are due to be released, per the Qatari prime minister. Also, Hamas issued a press release itself stating that a ceasefire agreement in Gaza has been reached. So all of the other sources seem to be corroborating what President Trump has put out. Hamas has announced that Dr. Khalil al-Hayya, the head of Hamas in Gaza and its lead negotiator, will deliver a speech on Gaza ceasefire agreement. That's the first time they've acknowledged that he is, in fact, the new leader of Hamas. It's a dangerous position to be in the Gaza Strip. Fox News has said that 33 hostages will be released, some alive, some dead. That's the first acknowledgement of a solid number, but it would be really surprising to see how many are actually alive. It might be very, very disappointing for a lot of people. So our thoughts and prayers go out to the families. Also, President Erdogan of Turkey brings his head back up. Erdogan issues a warning to Israel. Quote, "Turkish leader threatens consequences if IDF operations in Syria continue." Yeah, that's because the Turks are getting hammered there right now. Could be NATO on NATO. Again, that's a huge flashpoint in northern Syria. Also, a chilling exchange between two Palestinian terrorists jailed for October 7 atrocities. Mohammed says this, quote, "Why aren't you packing, not getting freed?" End quote. Ibrahim, "Nah, not enough blood on our hands." End quote. Mohammed, "Don't worry, when I'm out, we'll make October 7th look like child's play. We'll kidnap even more Jews to make sure you're freed." End quote. Ibrahim, "You're the man. The plan definitely works." End quote. This is why many Israelis are very skeptical of Hamas and why many people in the United States should be skeptical. I don't think people understand this. This is their way of life. It's their modus operandi. It's who they are. It's their nature. It's their character. They're jihadis. They're not going to stop unless they're stopped. And I think we need to get out of the way, really, of Israel to stop the threats against its own country. But more importantly for us, is this threat in our borders. When we come back from the break, more from the Russia front, and also some good news here nationally regarding Trump's nominees.
Attention business owners and entrepreneurs. Patriot TV is launching a brand new TV series showcasing American-made products, and your business could be featured. Whether you sell your products online on Etsy or Shopify and dream of reaching millions of viewers on smart TVs like Samsung, Sony, TCL, and LG, or apps like Roku, Android, and Apple TV, this is your chance. We're searching for US-based businesses offering all types of products and services proudly made in the USA. If you've ever wanted to showcase your products on TV like QVC or the Home Shopping Network, now's your opportunity. Support our American economy, grow your business, and be seen by loyal Patriot viewers across the country. Know someone with a business or have a business yourself? Don't miss out. Contact us at supportingpatriots.com today. Be a guest on this new exciting TV series. Let's put your American-made products in the spotlight.
Vladimir Putin will remain in office until 2036.
Putin is being called bold,
What's your strategy to bring them back to the Stone Age?
daring. You won't be able to look away.
How can his kingdom last?
Putin. Rated R. In select theaters January 10th.
From Horizon Events comes a bold and daring new thriller, Putin. It tells the inside story of Vladimir Putin's rise to power and perhaps here in the near future, a very shocking end. Putin is rated R and is in select theaters Friday. Now, I really love this because the push right now for an economy, you heard that on the commercial for Patriot TV, is real, where real manufacturers, real service providers coming together to make this country great again in a practical aspect. I've been waiting for this for years. It's amazing. Everything from banks, like where you can go and do your banking and not worry about being deplatformed or your account being closed down for whatever reason because you happen to believe the Constitution means what it says or you're a Christian. All of these things coming together right now. Let's actually seriously, as Americans, look at this together, because this is what is going to change this country. All of us operating as the kingdom of Jesus Christ as Christians and doing it in the practical ways as well in the marketplace. All right, that brings us now to the Russia front. Germany is planning to allow its army to shoot down suspicious drones. Germany is allowing this. Wish the United States would kind of get a good head on its shoulders. Oh, wait, that's going to happen here in a few days. Also, from the Early Warning Network, Polish President Duda continues to insist that Ukraine is immediately invited into NATO. I don't know why they keep saying this, because obviously there's discussions and negotiations that need to happen. Putin has zero interest in having Ukraine in NATO. So I'm not sure if that's just a posturing or what, but we're going to keep our eyes on that, because Poland really is stepping out right now as a bulwark against Russian expansion. NATO Secretary General, it is time to shift to a wartime mindset. Very clear that NATO thinks there will be further war with Russia. Again, Donald Trump doing what he can for peace there, but there's a lot more factors involved. And candidly, as we've reported here, it really seems like the Russia-Ukrainian war has been kept going because it'll be a trigger, one of the triggers, or part of World War III. And that brings us to the Central American and South American front. Venezuela, which is a client state of Cuba. Now remember, Biden on his way out the door is now lifting the state sponsor of terrorism label off Cuba. So Venezuela, which is a client state of Cuba, threatens to invade Puerto Rico. Biden responds by lifting the sanctions off of the Cuban military so that they can start raising money and actually do that. Donald Trump's got his work cut out for him immediately. But it really is like Biden is leaving, walking out the door, trying to do the worst things possible to weaken this country right ahead of the inauguration. Also, I would just mention this thing with China and DJI. DJI lifted the restrictions on drones, the geofencing restrictions, right before the inauguration, too. There's some things happening right now where there's last-minute poking, last-minute weakening of the United States. That brings us now to the national front. A new apologist has emerged on the Christian scene he's really made a splash. Wesley Huff. He was on Joe Rogan, has done a great job as an apologist for Christianity and really going through the facts. Well, recently, while he was on Joe Rogan, he made a couple of inaccurate statements that could have been said a little bit differently, and he came on to debunk himself. Wow, this is what you do right here. He came on to correct a couple statements that he made that could have been more accurately, more precisely phrased. So really appreciate when people are preaching the gospel like that. Sometimes when you do it without notes, you can say something totally unintentionally, imperfectly, and there really needs to be grace out there from everybody. But he was very, very humble in how he did this. Probably a video you should check out. Tom Homan, interesting. This news comes out of Bakersfield, California. Listen to this. So, illegal aliens were caught painting trucks to resemble Border Patrol. They were using that tactic to try and scare away, obviously, anybody who would question what was going on. Nothing new in California, I guess, but they're avoiding detection. And this implies that there is some significant funding that might be going into this, and at least some strategic thought. We're going to see more of this. There's going to be a flashpoint here with deportations in the next 5 months, particularly around May Day. That's what we're already beginning to hear. We're going to talk more about that with our guest today, Mike Shelby. Also, a pro-life group has accused Planned Parenthood of breaking Internal Revenue Service rules and supporting Vice President Kamala Harris during her failed presidential campaign. Official complaint has been filed by 40 Days for Life, saying that these prohibited political activities may impact Planned Parenthood's tax-exempt status in Florida. Interesting to see where this goes as well. Also, a top Pentagon advisor revealed on hidden camera with a couple of retired generals to explore what they could do to protect people from President Trump. Now former Pentagon advisor, who had been an FBI special agent, by the way, supposed to be somebody that understood counterterrorism, and he says something like, keep this between us. Wow. This has been in the offing for years. They're trying to keep people around that are there to undermine President Trump. I think every general serves at the pleasure of the commander-in-chief. Every single general, every single admiral should be forced to resign and reapply for their position to a board of retired admirals and generals who have actually won a war. That would be one way to get around this nonsense where you quite literally have them admitting on camera to subversion of the commander-in-chief. On a positive note, over 100 Navy SEALs and other veterans rallied in Washington, D.C. to support Pete Hegseth. Among those, a really good man and a legend from Spokane, Washington, Scott O'Grady. Quote, "It's enough. We're done. The political leadership in this country has failed us. We need to get back to making the Department of Defense not a political toy for them to inject their social experiments. The military is for one reason and one reason only. And that is to defend our country, to defend our citizens, and to defend our constitutional republic." End quote. Scott O'Grady, a Spokane boy making good. A legend, a hero, showing up in Washington, D.C., still on the battlefield, fighting and defending our country. Wow. Kudos to Scott O'Grady. He'd make a really good Secretary of the Air Force, by the way. It would seem. Just going to throw that out there. U.S. bans red food dye over possible cancer risk, according to the health department. RFK's not even in there yet. Perhaps we should relook what we're putting in our bodies. And that's another reason why when you develop a Patriot economy revolving around healthy food, supply chains, beef, these things will become very important in the years ahead, because we're going to be kind of shocked when the revelations come out about what has been done to our food supply. And you're going to want to be there with your family to be able to receive and to buy quality food. It's not going to break the bank. It's not going to put your family in poverty. Stay tuned. We got a lot of stuff coming. It's going to be great. Also, from Early Warning, we're going to talk a little bit about this upcoming events, 100 plus and growing protests and direct action events coming up. Well, this started back on 11 January, but it's continuing this weekend, 18 January. And I'm sorry I had to date that piece of it, but right with the run up to the election, or to the inauguration, they are trying to restart and gain traction. We're going to talk more about this in detail coming up. But these groups now are we're not just talking Antifa, Socialist Rifle Association, but Indivisible and some other more innocuous seeming groups. The problem is they've had a hard time recruiting, and their funding is dried up, as we're going to talk with our guest about. But just pay attention, because it's all over the country that these are happening, including in cities like Spokane. Also, Gavin Newsom announces a, quote, Marshall Plan to rebuild L.A. Sounds like a smart city to me. Pam Bondi. I mean, going at them. And I think let's play just a brief clip from her.
Can you say no to the President of the United States when he asks you to do something unethical or illegal?
Senator, first, I need to clarify something that you said, that I have to sit up here and say these things. No, I don't. I sit up here and speak the truth.
Amen.
I'm not going to sit up here and say anything that I need to say to get confirmed by this body. I don't have to say anything. I will answer the questions to the best of my ability and honestly.
Let me ask you.
There you go. So that's why Trump nominees are just running roughshod over the Democrats. They're saying stuff like this, responding very appropriately. Great job with some of these nominees coming forward, just pushing back. Also, we're going to end with this, a very quick clip, never before heard audio of former executive director of the DNC and close associate of Lyndon Baines Johnson, Clifton Carter, admitting that LBJ hired Mac Wallace to assassinate JFK.
How's life treating you today?
Well, Saul, it's been a pretty touch and go situation. Linda and I have had quite a few unpleasant words here lately over the deal with that he hired Mike Wallace to assassinate the president. It's been hectic in every way, but we've lived through it this far. I guess we'll continue to do so.
That is an incredible admission on tape. Tape has been authenticated. Hat tip to Alex Jones for breaking that story, but corroborating what many people have believed over the years. A lot more investigation needs to be done, and the entirety of the JFK files need to be declassified. That is the briefing. Remember, the antidote to dependency and socialism is to be a God-fearing, self-reliant, freedom-loving American. When we come back from the break, Mike Shelby.
Throughout history, the spirit of patriotism has prevailed. The battles may have changed, but the values remain the same. Today, in 2024, we find ourselves at a pivotal moment where the call for unity, freedom, and a better future echoes louder than ever. For more than 10 years, Patriot Mobile has been committed to supporting the values that make our nation great. With affordable plans and reliable nationwide coverage, Patriot Mobile is not just a wireless service. It's a call to action for those who believe in the American dream. Because this year is not just any year, it's the most important year since our nation's founding. Choose a wireless carrier that shares your values. Choose Patriot Mobile.
Hey folks, it's your buddy John Rich here and co-founder of Old Glory Bank. Let me ask you a question. Why would you trust your banking with people that hate you? Well, you shouldn't. We're building a freedom economy, and now we have a pro-America bank. It's called Old Glory Bank. Check it out at oldglorybank.com and open yourself an account today.
Old Glory Bank is a full-service, FDIC-insured online bank with business and consumer banking and customers in all 50 states. It takes just 8 minutes to open an account at oldglorybank.com.
And we're back today with our guest, Mike Shelby. He's a former Intel NCO intelligence analyst, founder of Forward Observer, and many other things. He is on the front lines of information and what is really happening on the ground here in the United States, especially with Marxist organizations. Mike, it's great to have you back on Patriot Radio.
Hey, Matt, thanks. I'm glad to be here.
So I know you took some time out of your busy day to do this. Really appreciate it. Some stuff went from really quiet. A lot of things were really quiet. A lot of our networks, very, very quiet. Monitoring, very quiet. And all of a sudden, the end of last week, things started to spin up. And now it looks like the Marxist organizations across the country may be doing some protests, beginning some marches here to try to get some traction this Saturday, the 18th. Tell the listeners, everybody watching, a little bit about that.
Yeah, back in December, some of the main Antifa blogs from the 2015, 2016, 2020 era published what they call an all call for participants. There's a thing called Festivals of Resistance, and they're being planned in probably like 24 cities across the country. And they're trying to get the gang back together. And these aren't like violent shock troop type events that we saw during the previous Trump administration, but they are hosting training events, workshops. They're trying to rebuild these atrophied networks. So after midway through 2021, even the worst, like in Portland, the worst of the Antifa movement kind of died down, and it has been very dormant. Things have been very quiet. And honestly, I think they've just been exhausted still from 2020. And I tell you, just in general, I'm not seeing the same sense of urgency going into 25 that we saw going into 16 and then into 17 and obviously into 2020. But they are making attempts. They're trying to gather these building blocks back together to rebuild the so-called anti-fascist movement. Really, it's a revolutionary anarcho-communist movement.
Why have they had such a hard time recruiting people and getting traction for some of these events, especially recently?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a couple of different potential explanations. Number one, 2020 came on the heels of 4+ years of just nonstop left-wing agitation, and that's not there anymore. They've lost that love and feeling, I think, and I think that does explain a lot of it. And we go back to the worst of 2020. We had a recession and we had stimulus. So these people, there were lockdowns. They weren't going to school. They weren't going to work. They had some walking around money from stimulus, so they could stay up all night rioting on Tuesday because they didn't have to go to work or didn't have to do anything to do on Wednesday. So I think that's another part of it. These people, just looking at this demographically, they're 4+ years older now. And I think a good many of them, not necessarily have aged out, but they're 4 to 8 years older than they were from, going back into 2016. And so I think for a portion of them, that's just a different stage of life. But there is a kind of a hardcore nucleus of these people, and I'm sure they'll be trying to riot into their 50s and 60s. And they're still around. So I think the core part of these networks are still there, and I think they're just having a lot of difficulty in bringing people back into the movement. Another one of the reasons is I don't know if people have looked around, but mayors and police officers are not kneeling for Palestine. They're not taking a knee for Antifa or BLM anymore, and they're actually going through and arresting a lot of these people. Like in Seattle on election night, November 5th last year, there was a small black bloc contingent, like the kind of violent rioting Antifa type. And as soon as they started conducting, like I think they're spraying graffiti on a wall, Seattle PD swooped right in and arrested 5 of them. And we look at what happened over the past couple of years in Atlanta, where 61 of these people were arrested and charged under RICO. A handful of them were charged under domestic terror laws in Georgia, right out in Atlanta, Georgia. I think it's just a very, very different security situation. Even in Portland, the Portland Police Bureau Chief Mike Day out there, this past summer, he said, we're not doing this again. We're not going to go through another 2020. And they've started investigating and mapping out these Antifa networks, and they've been, to various levels infiltrating a lot of these affinity groups. And so I think there is just a much larger concern that there is no political top cover for rioting and violent direct action demonstrations anymore. If that changes, I'm sure they'll go right back to it. But the security situation is just very different than it was from 2016 to 2020.
And we saw some of that here in Spokane. We caught some black bloc outside of the church building, actually, and some people it looked like they were reconning a place to dump supplies or detritus to throw at police or whatever they were going to do. As soon as that got reported, shut down, the guy took his black bloc off, put it in a bag, left, and it just diffused quickly. So I think there is some fear out there that they really will be prosecuted. I do want to talk about the top cover as well. Do they have the same financial resources, the same political cover that they did in 2016 and 2020?
Mm-hmm. Well, in terms of political top cover, I don't think, I look at mayors and police chiefs, what they're doing and saying in these cities. And again, they're not kneeling for Palestine or kneeling for anything anymore. And so I doubt there is top cover. There's not going to be room to riot, at least not for a while. That could change maybe after the midterms if Democrats don't take back the House or the Senate, and they're basically give Trump maybe another 2 years, Republicans another 2 years to finish out the Trump policies, whatever they're going to be. I think there's a sense of urgency. Sorry, I got an auto off in the office here. I think there will be a renewed sense of urgency, realizing hey, Trump is outside of the court system. Trump's unimpeded for 2 more years, and we're not going to give him 2 more years. So I actually think that sense of urgency will come back, and I don't think a color revolution or another attempted popular revolution is out of the question after the midterms if Democrats can't puncture the GOP Congress. So I look at that, and they're definitely trying to get these building blocks back together, but they've, like you said, they just haven't gotten a whole lot of traction.
So it also looks like their funding is drying up. I don't know if you're analyzing that as an economic reality that's resulting in that, or are they just kind of saving their money and biding time right now?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't think there's any other explanation other than large amounts of funding for how well organized and well supplied they were. Early on, I thought a lot of these groups were kind of self-funded, these individual actors and the affinity groups. I think they were self-funded. I think they're starting to buy their own equipment. And then back in 2015, 2016, obviously. And then as that movement progressed and started to grow, you started to see a lot of uniformity among the equipment and the very similar types of equipment in different places all across the country. And so that really is indicative, I think, of funding. And so whether that trickled down out of NGOs and trickled down out of protest groups to fund kind of the far left shock troops, I don't have that financial data available, but it's very clear the funding has dried up. They're not getting any money, at least not yet. They're not getting any money from anybody. And I think that's another big reason why they're having such a difficult time.
So it looks like they always kind of shoot for May to kind of reinvigorate, and May Day becomes this center of gravity. Whether it happens on the day or just before or just after is kind of really irrelevant. But it looks like some of the unions in the United States right now are looking at doing strikes and boycotts, starting to go into that May timeframe. Is there anything planned or anything that you're analyzing right now in the lead up to May that maybe they might try to do some recruiting drives this year, early summer?
Yes, this is something we actually covered on early warning here, and I'm trying to bring up the report. Yeah, I think there's something like 150 or 200 unions in the country right now going through some various stages of contract negotiation. So yeah, I do see this as a potential hurdle for Trump. I'll tell you, Robert follows a bunch of this stuff. I'm not as up to date as Robert is. He's one of our early warning analysts. But one thing we're tracking is UAW President Sean Fain has been trying to get all of these unions, speaking of May Day, to renegotiate their contract expiration dates to May 1st, 2028. And so he's been calling for a general strike, which is not just a UAW strike. It's where you have a lot of unions come together and say, we're going to hold out and do this national general strike. So that's going to be 28 is an election year. That's going to be put on Trump's plate if that does go through. But yeah, I mean, it's riot season stuff. Things start to warm up. I don't see any reason why the far left couldn't become more active between deportation efforts and then warmer weather. And then you get the agitation and this kind of push and pull between Republicans and Democrats in DC, and just a lot of polarization really returns with Trump in charge. I mean, I don't see why the far left couldn't start to rebuild, but they are definitely in this is a rebuilding year for Antifa for sure.
For sure. So how do you view this Saturday? You know, these protests all over the country seem to have benign titles to them. Here in Spokane, it's a women's rally or something like that. But there's always this underlying, it's the same core people that are leading these movements, whatever the name is, whether you call it John Brown Gun Club or Antifa or Socialist Rifle Association or Redneck Revolt or what have you. It's always similar people, same people, related people that are connected with these groups. So should people be alarmed about the protests coming up this Saturday? Should they be cautious?
I think people should be cautious. Last summer, I started seeing the things that I was talking about before, about how the pieces of the puzzle that we saw in 2016 and 2020 just weren't there heading in 24 and heading into 25. And I really started to caution people, probably don't expect mass protests and riots on the night that Trump wins.
Yeah.
And I thought a Trump win was likely. And, people were talking about Antifa escalating, and there's going to be like pink-haired suicide bombers at Chick-fil-A and stuff. And I didn't see any of that really from happening. Oh, I tell you, I listen to a lot of their podcasts and read a lot of social media and blog posts, and they're exhausted. And they're saying stuff like, it's so laughable to think that Antifa could have some kind of national insurrection heading into the first part of a Trump administration that they had from 2016, and especially into 2020. So so at any rate, looking ahead, it's a rebuilding year. Let's look at some metrics here. We can go back to January 2017. Those were the big J20, literally riots in DC. There was like 400,000 people, or roughly 400,000 protesters in DC for J20 2017. I think there's going to be less than that this year. There were over 400 protests nationwide, inauguration day related protests, and mainly in state capitals and cities in the U.S. in January 2017. Right now, I think there's maybe a little over 100 scheduled. There may be more, and they've been adding a lot, and we've been trying to keep track of all of them. But the numbers that I'm seeing is actually smaller for this month compared to 2017. And then you also have the problem of the left is not a monolith. So there are far left groups like Antifa and the anti-fascist movement and really revolutionary anarcho-communists, and they're doing these festivals of resistance. And then you have more progressive groups who are not the Antifa shock troops. They're more reformers. They're called kind of social democrats by the far left. And these are really progressive groups. And Indivisible and the Election Response Center, and there's a handful of other ones. And they're having these indivisible protests. And so I really look at those as kind of like two distinct movements, but they are happening all around the same time.
They are. When we come back from the break, we're going to be talking about Antifa, maybe foreign influence. What are some things that we can look for flashpoints coming in 2025 when we come back from the break?
Behind the power.
Vladimir Putin will remain in office until 2036.
Beneath the secrecy.
You'll be the most powerful man in the world.
Is the real story that defies reality. Putin is being called bold.
What's your strategy to bring them back to the Stone Age?
Chilling. You won't be able to look away.
How can his kingdom last?
Putin. Rated R. In select theaters January 10th.
I couldn't give anything a higher endorsement.
I would be remiss had I not include Cardio Miracle on my very short list of secrets.
It's the real deal. It's a real product. It's not another supplement.
I'm operating about 6 to 8 hours, and I've noticed that being on this Cardio Miracle has made a huge difference.
Since I started taking Cardio Miracle, about 8 months into it, the benefits have been fantastic.
You know, if I get hungry, then I just have a Cardio Miracle.
Not only is it safe, but it's necessary to take Cardio Miracle to stay well.
This let me sleep. It's showing up more energy, more get up and go. And it's all because of what this company does.
For me as a doctor, Cardio Miracle is a staple.
Cardio Miracle to me is hope in a glass.
To try Cardio Miracle for yourself and get a special fan discount, go to the host page right now and click the link for Cardio Miracle.
We're back with Mike Shelby. He's an intelligence analyst, former Intel NCO. EarlyWarningNetwork.com. Check it out if you have never heard of it before, and also Forward Observer. Mike, we were talking about before the break this attempt to try to spin up the Marxist movements here in the United States where they've kind of lost traction. It really does beg a question. We talked about a lack of funding coming in for them. But, you know, Antifa, John Brown Gun Club in particular, there have been some troubling ties to countries like China. Is there a legitimate tie to some foreign influence here by some of these Marxist groups inside the United States? And if so, what is it?
I don't think it's impossible. I don't have any information to confirm that. I look at the scenario, and this is something that the Defense Department started warning about back in 2018 with the National Defense Strategy. And back in December 2020, they published an Army Facility Security Report that said specifically, they didn't name China, but they just said foreign adversaries, e.g. China, would use both conventional and unconventional means to attack the homeland. And so we focus on that unconventional part. So using things like protests, transnational criminal organizations, you could put domestic terror groups in that as well. I don't have any hard evidence that any of these Antifa-related groups are receiving foreign funding, but I just look at the situation and I say, that is a possible course of action for China.
I would think so. I mean, I would think they would at least try to take advantage of it, leverage it in some way. You know, we talk about Marxist groups. It also brings up, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, if the Chinese did that, it would be through some cutouts. So it would be Chinese money going to some left-wing NGO here domestically. And, I'm sure they can do it with forensically, where it's very difficult to track that money back to China. So even if China was, we may not have direct evidence of it.
So, we bring up these Marxist groups. I think that jihadi terror groups and organizations, splinter cells here in the United States really get ignored. And especially with the border being open for so long, we know that Unit 910 has come into the country. We know the Muslim Brotherhood Special Section has people in this country. We know that Jungle Tigers are here in this country. So, people say, well, what can I possibly do about it? What can I be on the watch for? But really, I want to just talk about the idea that maybe jihadi terrorists have become operationalized and some of these lone wolf attacks might be a little bit more coordinated than, at first glance, the media would suggest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I listen to all 8 hours of the Sarah Adams interviews on Sean Ryan's show, and I left feeling concerned. Sarah Adams is a former CIA analyst and targeter, and I would say if anyone knew that threat, she would. And she does say I think she said there's something like 1,000 Al-Qaeda operatives. Now, I don't believe that. Again, I don't have source information, which my intelligence analyst brain would obviously like to see. But I have no reason to doubt her on that in general. And so I look at this as a worst case scenario. I mean, there absolutely could be a protracted campaign. Trump has just been very pro-Israel. The Israelis believed, they said publicly just a few weeks ago that they believe that Trump would back them on strikes against Iran.
Yep. And
so you combine the war in Gaza with the war in Lebanon and, maybe potentially a war with Iran. And yeah, I do think, and the Iranians, they're still kind of peeved that Trump ordered the strike against Soleimani. So, and others as well. So, I think they would have a reason to do that. On the other end, like Iran's probably looking at regime change if there was something like that got tied back to Iran. I don't know. This is no longer my realm of expertise after about 2012 or so.
Yeah, so I think that this always comes to this question. Okay, average American citizen overwhelmed by news. Okay, yeah, there might be terror groups inside the United States. Okay, yeah, there might be Marxist protests. Why should I care? What should I do about it? What can I really expect here in the next year?
Mm-hmm. Well, our outlook at Early Warning Network is we do try to be ahead of news. I mean, sometimes we see stuff coming from a mile away, and we let our subscribers know. We can't predict everything. So being that we can't predict when or where those attacks could occur specifically, the next best thing that you or I or anyone else can do is look at the follow-on effects and look at what's going to be disrupted. And so if Sarah Adams is right that Al-Qaeda operatives are planning a Mumbai-style swarm attack against soft targets, so hotels, resorts, schools, anywhere, we all know what soft targets are. Then the next thing is, do your area study, like start to scope out. I think for the average person, the likelihood is minuscule, but it's obviously going to happen to someone if this whole campaign actually does happen. So you got to note all that stuff in your area study. First of all, you have to understand your local operational environment, and then look at the second and third and fourth order effects, the follow-on effects from all this. How is this going to affect your neighborhood? How could this affect markets? How could this affect U.S. foreign policy? How could this affect laws? I would think that, I don't know, but in terms of new laws, but they're really trying to get that Section 702 nailed down in FISA. And so I just think domestic terrorist attacks are obviously going to allow them to do that. Even Tulsi Gabbard, I'm not even sure if she actually believes it. Maybe she does, but she flip-flopped. Now she supports Section 702, which is basically domestic wiretapping or domestic surveillance provisions of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. So, we just have to look at the follow-on effects, because that's, unless you're on the X, the follow-on effects is what you're prepared for. And then beyond your area study, you got to build a local information sharing network. We need people with placement and access, people who know what's going on, people who have access, firsthand access to information, so they can provide us the ground truth beyond what we can see in our line of sight, beyond what we can hear. And so in the Army, we said every soldier is a sensor. And so every member of your neighborhood should also be a sensor, or your community, and you should be organizing those sensors. It's a lot easier said than done, but building a local information network will be paying you dividends during a national crisis.
Well, I think that brings up the Early Warning Network itself. You were really forward thinking. Actually it was more than that. Back in 2014, Ferguson riots, all these things start happening. Being really forward thinking and saying, we should start sharing information across the country. We're going to start to recognize patterns. We're going to start to recognize tactics, techniques, and procedures. We're going to start to recognize what works, what doesn't work in fighting these types of things, or at least reporting them. So describe for everybody that has never heard of the Early Warning Network before, what is it on a national scale, and what do you hope to achieve by it?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's an information sharing network. So we have intelligence analysts here, like, former intelligence and special operations veterans are full-time employees at Early Warning Network. There are full-time analysts, and we're always looking through data points and looking at left-wing movements and looking at all forms of political, social, and economic risk. One of the things that we do is every day we publish protest locations across the country, and then we monitor what these protest locations or what these protest groups are doing. And I forgot to mention, there are two things that everyone needs to pay attention to, especially, you out there in Spokane. I know there's a bunch of chapters and stuff out there. One is a lot of these left-wing groups have been holding de-arrest training. And so they're practicing literally going out and blocking law enforcement from making arrests of illegal immigrants. So they'll go out there, they'll get in the way, they'll block the police cars, they'll block access to apartment buildings or migrant shelters or whatever they call them, and then ultimately physically pull someone away from custody. It's called de-arrest for a reason. They're trying to interrupt the process of being arrested. These trainings happen all across the country. If you live in a big city, chances are very good that it's happening in your area. So that's the first thing I would look out for. And that's really just understanding that these groups are active in your area is the first step towards situational awareness. Once we know who they are, then we can begin to monitor them, and then we can start building early warning for what they're planning. Another thing is there's Mi Gente and a number of other like Hispanic pro-illegal mass immigration groups, and they've been building this thing called what they call rapid response networks. And so this is when, again, they understand everyone's a sensor. And so they're telling all their people in their networks, if you see La Migra, if you see an ICE vehicle or you see an immigration stop happening, like let us know. And then they'll rebroadcast that via social media, text messages, emails. And what they're really trying to do, it's called rapid response network. They're trying to get people to rapidly respond and descend at that location. And so this is stuff that they did that back during the first Trump administration. But, I think if there is one single thing that's going to be a flashpoint in like over the next couple of months, it's got to be obstruction of law enforcement. And so that is, I would pay particular focus to that, because if there is some violence, then my bet is that's going to happen over these deportation efforts.
Yeah, I think people can gin up a lot more support for something like that than they have been able to for supporting Palestine. 100%. Mike Shelby, thanks for joining me on Patriot Radio. Did you have any final words? Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, it's going to be the rallying cry. I mean, if you start seeing abuelitas and little children, getting hauled off in flex cuffs, or there's a Kent State type of event or police involved shooting, it's going to turn some portion of Americans who are generally pro-immigration enforcement, maybe anti-immigration enforcement. And, if I'm the far left, I'm trying to make hay out of that, really.
Yeah. And I think they might end up being somewhat successful in doing that if there isn't some proactive steps taken. Mike, I really appreciate you coming on again. Taking the hype out and bringing the facts always brings calm and cool, collective, reasonable analysis to the situation. Really appreciate everything you're doing. And thanks for joining me on Patriot Radio today. Keep up the fight, brother.
All right. Thanks. You too, Matt. Appreciate it.
Mike Shelby, former Intel NCO, intelligence analyst, earlywarningnetwork.com. So the question is, with all of this, we ask, what can you do? Well, one of the things you can do is join the Early Warning Network. Check it out. You can share real-time information, see some of the maps of things that are going on around the country, get some training on what intelligence analysis actually is and what an area study is and how to do it. You can take a look at some of the cutting-edge technology that is out there that's going to affect not only military doctrine and warfare, but it's also going to affect counterterrorism. So you can really be in the know for your community and have some great discussions with your local law enforcement, local county prosecutors, and share real information, facts with them that they can also act on, that they can take back to their fusion centers or take back to their intelligence analysis groups and teams, and make your community a better place. It's going to take all of us, not just one man. And especially as deportation starts, just as Mike was saying, looks like there's going to be a lot of flashpoints or potentials for flashpoints coming into the spring and the summer this year. This is Matt Shea. Thank you so much for joining me on Patriot Radio today. May God bless all of you. He is making this generation the greatest one. The awakening is here. Keep up the fight.